For dimensioning the stand, we don't like to assume dimensions, but the fact that this one is symmetrical means that we don't have to put quite as many dimensions on. There are still quite a few. And dimensioning angles is typically done on the part, even though one of our dimensioning rules is we don't want to dimension on the part when possible. But interior angles are typically dimensioned on the object. So this leads to a problem in terms of the font size. This will be the first time that we're actually changing the font size. I'm going to be proactive and change the font size knowing this. Our default font size in inches is 0.18 inches. And we're going to change it to 1/8 of an inch, or 0.125. As we make this change, we also need to change the arrowhead size. The arrowhead size has to match the font size. And this all can be found in the Dimension Style window. And to get to that, in the dynamic input, start typing in dimension, and I find Dimension Style. So we go to Modify and Text, the tab for text. Our text type by default, or what we have been using, is 0.18. As we start to put these interior dimensions on, we run out of space really quickly. By changing the font size, we can fit these in to tighter places and still be clear and concise. So by making a change to 0.125, which is 1/8 of an inch, we also need to change the arrowhead size to match 0.125. Number of decimal places, we need at least 2 decimal places for this one. I'm going to leave it set to 3, but primary units, number of decimal places to make the change, and then hit OK. So as I start to put on linear dimensions, like overall length, overall width, and height, you're not going to notice a big problem due to the size of the font. It's really going to come when you start to put the dimensions in for the angles. Again, being that this part is symmetrical, we don't have to dimension both sides. We don't like to assume, but that is pretty much a stated fact in this one. Another linear dimension that we do not want to overlook, and we will have to break a rule here, or it's better to break the rule, by dimensioning on the object for a linear dimension. And that would be this width of this center section. Being that there are no other features interfering here, dimensioning this somewhere in this area, not over an object line, would be preferred. Our only other option is to dimension it in the right side view, which we would be then dimensioning to hidden lines. So even though we're breaking a dimensioning rule, this is a better option than dimensioning the hidden lines. Overall length, width, and height. Now for the groove or the U-shaped cutout on the inside. 2.5 inches over was a dimension that was given. I could mirror this dimension, but somehow I have to know that this slot is 1. 2.5 plus 2.5 is 5. 5 minus the overall width of 6 gives me a dimension of 1, so this would be okay. I could also do something like this, which would be acceptable. And we need the depth. Typically don't want to use object lines as extension lines, but again, if we did a dimension like this for a linear dimension, one, we have an extremely long extension line, plus that extension line is crossing 1, 2, 3, 4 object lines and 2 hidden lines. This would not be the ideal situation. So from here, it's all about the angle dimensions. And this is really why we changed that font size. We have to change from linear dimension to an angular dimension. And as we select 2 given lines, we do want the dimensions in between the arrowheads when possible. This means that we really have to dimension on the object. and interior angles are typically shown in that fashion. We also have a 45-degree angle. And we're going to try to place it right here. Right now this 45 is outside of the arrowheads. If we select on the text and the fact that we have changed that font size, the fitment is much better with the smaller font size. We do have a 60-degree angle, and I am going to take that here on the top. Same situation as the 45. The dimension happened to be placed on the outside. Being that we are in the smaller font size, we should be able to place that in between the arrowheads. I want to do that one again. Select the top line, select the angled line, and I should be able to place that dimension in between the arrowheads. So overall, the fact that this part is symmetrical really can limit the number of dimensions that we have to take. Changing the font size definitely affects where we can place the dimensions, especially the angled dimensions in between the arrowheads.